Good morning and welcome back. Carnivore Confidential, Dougie the Butcher. Today we're making ground beef. I personally like to grind my own because I like to know what's in it. And I also like to mix pork and beef. And a lot of stores won't contaminate their machinery with two different species. So come on back, we're gonna get started. I've got a blade roast I'm gonna slice up. I've got some pork fat that was left over from my pork loin video. And I've got some beef trimmings that was left over from my beef jerky video last week. So we're gonna mix them all up today and we're gonna make ground beef. Ground pork and beef. Anyway, it makes luscious ground beef and it's delicious. Come on back. Good morning and welcome back, carnivores, to Carnivore Confidential, Dougie the Butcher. Today we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna make our own ground beef. If you don't have one of these, perhaps you might have a stand mixer, a KitchenAid stand mixer that has the grinder attachment on the front of it. But at any rate, this is a handy thing to have in your kitchen, folks. I personally like to make my own ground beef because I like to know where it comes from and I like to know what goes into it. And quite often stores won't mix species, and I like pork and beef ground together, so I do that all myself. Anyway, this little Cuisinart grinder, it serves my purposes, and I think it cost me about 140 bucks. I got it online, Wayfair or Amazon, something like that. And again, I'm not endorsing these. I don't get sponsored for mentioning these things. It's just what I have in my own personal kitchen. Anyway, so what we have today, hold please. Pardon me. What we have today is a blade roast that I purchased, and we're going to cut it up. We're going to do this in stages because what I like to do is like to cut this up. You'll remember from my jerky video, the trimmings that I had from my jerky video. That's that. And you'll also remember the pork fat that I had from my pork loin video. That's that. So what we're going to do is we're going to slice this all up, and then I'm going to briefly chill it in the freezer because it really, really helps when you're grinding. Also, one more thing. This whole setup needs to go, this whole setup, not necessarily this, but this whole setup needs to go in the freezer because the colder this is, this creates friction. The little knife in here, there's an auger, right, that pushes the meat forward past this blade, and this blade makes contact with this plate. And the metal on metal, I mean, think about it, it's like the piston in a combustion engine. Metal on metal creates friction, and the colder this is, the better. So I like to put this in the freezer to make it nice and cold before I start. And while I'm grinding, I like to, we'll slice this up, all this up, and then in strips, I'm going to lay them out on a sheet pan in my freezer and chill them for a good 20 or 30 minutes. I don't want them frozen, but I want them cold and I want them hard. The harder they are, the easier it is to push through this machine because this machine works pretty hard. But anyway, come on back in a second. I'm going to put this in the freezer and we'll get back to working on this, okay? So stick around. Welcome back, folks. Okay, the head of the grinder is in the freezer, and let's get busy here. Don't really need a knife quite that big for this job. Let's do this. All right, blade roast. Beautiful blade roast. Great for pot roasting. Great for stew. If you get it close to the rib end as opposed to the neck end, which this is, then you'll see that this is an extension of the rib eye. And quite often, if blade steaks are on sale, tell your butcher you want a couple of blade steaks cut from the blade end, not the neck end, the blade end, and you're getting almost rib eye for blade steak price. Today's fun fact. I'm just going to put this stuff out of the way for now. All right, this has a string on it, a couple of strings. Let's just get rid of those. And all right, so gloving up, safety first. There we go. And I'm just going to take this apart in strips, or slices rather, because I'm not cutting any of the fat out. I'm going to keep all of the fat. I want all of that fat from my ground beef. And this is a pretty lean blade roast, as you can see. Hence, my beef trimming, right? Which we're also going to slice. I'll do that in a second. And then we're going to add the pork fat. So first, let's do this. So again, I want strips that I'm going to be able to push through the throat of my grinder, alternating beef with pork fat, so I get a nice mix. And then I'm going to, once it's ground, then I'm going to lay the grind, the fresh grind, out on a sheet pan with some parchment paper. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back in the freezer, the first grind. I'm going to put it back in the freezer. We'll separate it into strips again, not strips, but sort of rows for the second grind to make that easy to go through the grinder head as well, right? So here we are. We've got our blade strips. Blade. Okay. Beef trim from our jerky video. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I got two very interested dogs, I think just off camera, or they might be in view right there. And yes, I won't forget about you guys. Okay, so this was the cap of fat on the rib, on the round, the eye of round. And I want that. And these are just trim bits. I don't need to cut them up any further because they're already small enough. And pork fat. Okay, that's already small enough. And I may or may not use all of this because there's quite a bit of it. But the chain right here, this part of the chain, that's got some lean on it as well. So again, we're just cutting this into strips that will easily go down the throat of the grinder. So that's all done. Okay, come on back in a second, folks. I'm going to clean this stuff up, and we're going to get the sheet pan with some parchment paper on it and lay this out to put it back in the freezer. So come on back. Hey there, okay, welcome back. I didn't bore you with showing you actually how I did this, but as you can see, I just laid out the meat strips on a piece of parchment paper, and of course I ran out of parchment paper, so tinfoil would have to do. And I ran out of real estate, so as you can see, I just doubled it up. Okay, so off to the freezer, and when we come back, we'll be grinding. Stick around, folks. Okay, we're back from the freezer, and the freezer has done its job. So nice and frosty, like I said, we needed to have. I'll quickly throw this together. And we're going to get started here. Okay, so let's get started here. Move some stuff out of the way. Now what I'm going to try and do is alternate a piece of beef and a piece of pork and a piece of beef and a piece of pork, and so on. So let's get started. And the freezer did its job, that's good. All right, so we had a little bit of an issue here. You got to make sure that the head here is actually in contact with the gear at the back here in order for the auger to turn. And mine wasn't, so I was struggling with it a little bit. So here we go, let's take 2. There's a piece of... Okay, this is making a tremendous amount of noise. I'm going to cut this here and come back when I'm finished. You can obviously see what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So come on back for that, folks, and we'll pick up where we left off, and I'll show you what the second step of doing all of this is, okay? All right, folks, so that's it. I've ground all of the meat up. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to take this all apart and clean it. And then it's going to go back in the freezer because I want to regrind this. I want to grind this a second time, and that helps to mix it. I'm just going to loosely mix it by hand first to sort of disperse the pork fat amongst the beef. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it out on a sheet pan again and sort of make them into rows, tubes, I suppose, if you were. Put them back in the freezer because, again, remember, cold meat is easier to grind. It's easier on your machine. And then that will be the second grind, and then we're just going to bag it, put it in the freezer, and that's it. Ground beef 101, over. Thanks for coming back. Come on back when I'll show you the rest of this in 1 second. Okay, I didn't want to bore you with the details of how I was doing this, but as you can see, I was going to make long rows, but I decided just a handful of the ground mixture and just squeeze it up. Right, put it up back on your sheet trays, and just like this, and then we're going to stick it back in the freezer for another 20 minutes or so, just to make it nice and cold again for the grinder. Makes it easier on the grinder when the meat is really, really cold. And as I said, I'm going to wash the assembly, the head and the blade, and the grinder assembly, and put it back in the freezer as well. So come on back for that, folks. Stay hungry. I know this is a bit of a labor of love, but it's worth it. Anything worth doing is worth doing right, and this is the right way to do it as far as I'm concerned. All right, come on back. All right, we are back. Freezer, 20 minutes or so, something like that. And let's put this back together. Make sure there we go. I want to make sure I didn't make the same mistake I made before and not have the gear here engaged with the motor itself. It created a bit of a struggle for me. All right, so like I said, I made kind of little like sausage-like rolls, easy to fit down the throat of the machine. It's going to grind it for the second time, which is what I want. And without further ado, it's already sort of hand mixed, but the grinder will do the job of mixing it again for the second time. So here we go. It's going to be a little loud, like I said. I'll just show you the first couple of ones, and then I'll turn this off and come back to it when I'm finished. And okay, so you can see what I'm doing. I won't bore you with it because it's repetitive, like I just said. So come on back. I'm going to do this, and we'll cut back when I'm finished. Okay, so thanks for hang around, folks. Hang around. All right, folks. So I've finished grinding it all up for the second time, The only thing left to do is to bag it and freeze it, and I'm not going to bore you with that because everybody knows how to do that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed what you saw. Any questions or comments, please feel free to add to the bottom in the comment section. And meanwhile, please like and subscribe to my new channel. Your support means the world to me. That's it for today. Stay hungry, folks, and we'll see you next week with a brand new video. I got lots coming down the line. Take care, folks.